and gentlemen,
this is the run we've all been waiting for.
It's good night, Drake and Irene! Let's get ready to rumble!
Time! Knows how to knock people the fire truck out.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it's Kelly from Fight Chase, and we're back again for episode 2. We are going to compare the UFC against one championship. Which one's better? What do we prefer? And I'm here along with
Kurt Brooks from Carson Kickboxing Club.
If you're in Carson, if you're anywhere in the States, go visit Kurt. If you're out here in Thailand, come visit me. Or I'll come visit you. I travel all around over here. So let's get right into it. One championship. If you have missed one championship, if you had not watched one championship, because it's a little harder to watch in the States, but now they do have a deal with, I believe it's TNT in the States, so you might want to find out how to watch it. Versus the UFC, the dominant, most well-known figure in MMA, the UFC, the giant. So let's start this off. Kurt, what is you watch both of these, what is your favorite part of, let's kind of play devil's advocate, what's your favorite part of the UFC?
The UFC. So I think my favorite part of the UFC is just the pool of talent that they have. They have a really good pool of talent in almost all of the weight classes. And, you know, the other thing that's really good about the UFC is it's easy to become familiar with the fighters that are in the UFC. Like, they all have American names. They all have social media. You can look them up. They all speak English. It is really easy to get to know the fighters that are in the UFC. Whereas in one, you have a lot of complex names to pronounce, and it's kind of hard to find information on them, even though that they may have 5 times the amount of fights of most anybody in the UFC.
So basically with that, now here's the devil's advocate. We're looking at it from a perspective of the United States. Now, ONE FC is focusing on an Asian market. The owner has said that. He said that, you know, the U.S. isn't really that big of a deal to him. They're focusing on martial arts. So, that being said, I understand because I can't pronounce a lot of English names. So, but yeah, they're focusing on the Asian market, and they said they have, what does he say, 1 billion viewers or something like that on a regular basis. It's astonishing that the reach that they have, and they have over 4 billion people like that they could broadcast to, and then now that they're expanding. But my opinion, yeah, the UFC, the talent that it can get, because it's the forerunner in MMA. You know, they really, what the owner of ONE actually said is MMA is a dirty name that you know the Americans thought up. There's no such thing as MMA. It's all martial arts. So I can kind of see what he's saying, but if you don't know, he's a very true martial artist, the owner of the ONE FC. He loves all the, you know, aspects of the martial arts, the respect and everything like that. But as far as UFC goes, I think the talent that they're able to obtain, being considered number one in MMA, is their biggest asset. They obtained some weird talent, like the Brock Lesnar thing, you know, or what was the other guy, the wrestler that didn't do so well?
CM Punk.
CM Punk. I mean, so they obtained some weird things, some obscurities. But I believe that with them having, you know, that top level name and marketability, that they can pick up the best fighters in MMA right now. So opposite that, what do you think that the best part of ONE is?
The best part of ONE, I think, is just the way that they present themselves. There's a lot of different things, but I think if you really, let's just look at the figurehead. So you have Dana White, and then you have Chad Taree. How do you say his name?
Oh, man.
The ONE FC owner?
Shot Tree?
I'm going to Yeah, Chateaury, I believe. But anyways, if you look at both of them, and that kind of goes back into what I was saying, even the owners' names kind of hard to say, let alone the fighters' names. But one of the things about them is you kind of see their personalities are very different, and the organizations that they run are very different. And I feel like the UFC is more, for lack of a better term, it's more like there's more bros in the UFC. There's more of a bro audience. They play up things like the rivalries, like between Khabib and Conor. They're like really big into, kind of showcasing these big rivalries where there's a lot of bad blood. Where in ONE FC, they're really just looking at skill versus skill, and they're always very respectful. The fighters are to one another, and I think they get paid well regardless of how they hype the fight up in ONE FC. Where the UFC, you're definitely getting rewarded for doing, crazy things like throwing a dolly at a bus, talking crap on Twitter, even though they try to pretend like they don't like it. They're loving it because they're making way more money off of it.
Oh yeah, it brings in a lot of fair weather fans, or people that had no idea, or people that like drama, or most of the United States who like some sort of drama, and to hate one person and like another person, which you don't see so much in one. So let me touch back real quick on the Dana White versus it's Chatri Sityodtong. So
Okay.
Let's just go into that name. Sityodtong is a staple of Muay Thai in Thailand. Chatri actually has more than 30 fights. Okay, so the owner of ONE is a fighter. So Dana White is not. Dana White's a businessman, a heck of a businessman, but there's that gap. That's, you are missing something. You've not walked in those shoes. To be overseeing all of those personalities, those people. He's overseeing the business, where I think Chatri's actually overseeing the whole thing. Do you know what I mean? Like, he's seeing each fighter. He knows what it takes to make the fighters look good. If you watch any of the promotional stuff for ONE, it tells the home stories. It's what the UFC does now for some of their main fighters. You see, like, they do a little The Embedded and things like that now. Mm-hmm. Where ONE is doing that for most of their fighters. Their stories of where they come from, what they do. And there's a lot of really good stories in ONE coming through Asia, especially like the Muay Thai fighters. Tells the stories of when they were starting at 6 years old and things like that. But I agree that ONE has, I want to say, more of a respect for the martial art aspect of it and not the theatrics. I watched an interview on, I don't even remember who it was. I want to say it was Chael Sonnen talking about the business model of the UFC and how the business model is literally modeled identical to the WWE. And then one of the Fertitas was like, this is how we're modeling our company. So as far as even pay-per-view and things like that, like Chael was talking about, because everybody's in an uproar about how to watch UFC events now.
Oh, with that ESPN Plus?
Yeah, and how it's difficult and blah, 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 and they're moving away from like the pay-per-view or whatever they're doing. I'm not even in the loop of that. But he's like, if you look at what the WWE did, is they did the same thing. Because WWE used to be the same way. They used to have an event like every month on pay-per-view, and that's how they were paying money and things like that. And they went away from that, and they started syndicating. Like, I guess they're on TV like almost every night, wrestling events. And they're still selling out stadiums. Well, that's what the UFC has done. I mean, the UFC, I can't keep up with how many events they have, and they're on TV. So people, I guess, are complaining about how to watch the new stuff. But if they're fans or if they've been engaged by the drama, they're going to find a way to watch it. Whereas ONE is on TV here in Thailand, like public TV. It's broadcasted in, I don't know, a ton of countries, and they boast to being able to have a 1 billion viewer audience being broadcasted to enough people. Obviously, not 1 billion people are going to watch every time, but they're saying that, it can go into 1 billion homes. So if everybody wanted to watch it, they could. And I believe that the reach of one being under someone that has martial arts background is a big difference of what's between one and UFC.
Which is kind of crazy too, because if you look at the way that they communicate, Dana White talks like he's always confrontational. He always sounds like he's trying to start a fight with somebody, where Chatteri, he doesn't come off that way whatsoever.
No, he's very respectful. But compare that, just as two people, compare that as you personally to to a guy at a bar. You can probably whip this guy's ass. Typically, like as a martial artist, in your head, you're confident of what you can do. And this guy in a bar has the loudest mouth. You probably never been in a fight because he talks so much. Maybe he's bigger than you. So that's what I see. Dana White's the head of this big company. He can talk all the trash he wants. He just can, and then he talks that way to the public. He talks that, you see him in talking to Ariel. You see him talking to people, like talking trash about fighters, just really voicing his opinion in a dominant way. But then you see Chatteri, and a lot of people haven't yet, but you'll notice it more and more. Watch one of his on YouTube. You can find his pre-fight speech to all his fighters. It's very emotional. It's very heartfelt. It's not a screaming like you've seen the ones that Dana White does. It's like go out there and give it all you have, and this is your chance, and you better effing this and that. That's not how Chatteri approaches it, but he's very inspirational, and he wants these fighters to go and give it, their heart. And because with something else we'll talk about, you're not going to lose your job if you don't win in one. You will in UFC, you'll lose your job. If you're not a Conor McGregor or one of those guys. Conor McGregor could lose his next 5 fights. He's still going to be able to have fights. Somebody was talking about that the Nate and Conor fight will always be relevant because it's the trilogy. So it's always going to be relevant. So 10 fights down the road for either of them, they could pull that fight out of the hat and they'll make, millions of dollars. So those guys are on a different level. But if you're a normal fighter, 3 and you're out, 3 strikes, you're out. You have to go find a new job. Now, what's crazy is we know people in the UFC, fighters, they sign contracts. You sign a contract, like you signed a new 6-fight deal, and you're like, yeah, I got a 6-fight deal in the UFC. If 3 of those don't go your way, no, you don't.
Yeah,
they cut you off. So how does that benefit you as a fighter? And then
go ahead.
What also I think that it develops is a lot of these fights that we see that people just fight to win. Like just kind of like, oh, they know they're ahead 2 rounds. Don't get hurt. It takes away some, because if you get hurt, you're not going to fight. If you get beat, maybe you're on your 3rd fight and you're a losing streak, and you're like, oh, I'm two rounds ahead, but you're not going to finish this guy because you're like, yo, I'm just going to be safe. I'm going to win. But what if I do anything crazy and I lose? Then I don't have a job. So I think it takes away some of the hunger as a finisher, not as a fighter. You get in there and I'm sure you have that, you want to win. But what if you already know you're winning in the 2nd round? That guy's got nothing for you. But if you make a mistake, he can capitalize. If it's an elite level ground fighter or something, and you're like, man, if this goes to the ground, though, he could submit me at any time. So I think it plays into your head, because now you're against the ultimatum of, okay, you're 2 fights out, 1 more fight. You lose this fight that you're in the middle of. It's going to play into your head. Compared to, all right, you lost 2 fights, but now you're fighting a new guy. That's not in your head. You could do whatever you want. You could put on a hell of a show, to the fullest of your capabilities. And you could take risks. Like if you learn something new that you want to try that you think might win the fight, you could do it. Not in the same aspect of you're worried that you're going to lose that fight.
Yeah, that type of pressure, I just don't think is good for a fighter. Like once you start to become obsessed with the outcome of the fight, not necessarily what you're going to be doing in the fight. I believe for a lot of fighters that becomes problematic. Like, instead of going out there thinking, no matter what happens, I'm going to put on the best show possible. Like, I believe that is the right attitude that you should have. But if you're like, oh man, I'm going to get cut if I don't have a good performance and I lose. And then you're going to start doing things like you're talking about. You're not going to have that exciting fight. Maybe you're just going to try to secure a takedown and lay on top of them the entire time.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you went to work every day and knew that you had 2 bad days and like, you better get XYZ done today. That's all you have to do. You're not going to do XYZ 1, 2, 3. You're not going to excel at your job. And you're also not, you're just going to do what it takes to keep your job. And I know that as fighters, they're not doing necessarily that, but it's going to play into your mental state, I believe.
Yeah, exactly.
What about, a bonus that one championship has is the multiple martial arts setup. Now, I know they have MMA, kickboxing, and Muay Thai rule sets. So this is, aside from what the UFC can offer you, they're throwing in between, like, it's not separated as, we're doing this on one night and this on another night, or even this in one staging area and this in another staging area. They're throwing everything together. When I trained with Lordzilla and Phuket Top Team, he had just signed a new 6-fight deal with one championship. So he signed a 6-fight deal, and he said, I was like, oh, cool. Are you, little gloves or big gloves? Now, what I mean by that is they fight Muay Thai and MMA in 4-ounce gloves, the MMA style gloves, but they also use big gloves. So he had a 3-and-3. He had 3 fights in the big gloves and 3 fights in the little gloves. And it's another aspect that they're throwing in there, because in Muay Thai, man, they're elite level strikers, and in kickboxing, and then you put them in a 4-ounce glove. Goodness, they put people to sleep or rearrange people's faces like, unfortunately, Sage got done.
Yeah, I really like that multiple, different types of fighting styles in the same night, because it really appeals to the real martial arts fan. Because if you're a real martial arts fan, you love every aspect of MMA, and they're basically breaking it down. Because the problem with MMA a lot of times is that people are jacks of all trades, and you don't see the finely polished skills of a jiu-jitsu world champion or a Muay Thai world champion. You just don't get to see it. But when you split them up and you have those champions, you really get to see all those beautiful skill sets. And it's awesome too, because it gives the fighters the opportunity to try to, hone their skills. Like Demetrius Johnson was saying that, like, he might even try a kickboxing bout that he's over in 1FC now. He might try a jiu-jitsu match. Like, it's pretty awesome. They get them to sharpen their skills and the different aspects of each individual art, which I think is awesome. It's just great.
Yeah, I guess as a martial artist, as a competing martial artist, you kind of always want to grow. Well, most people do. They want to. So especially if you're an MMA fighter. Now, you're an MMA fighter, and then you have really good striking. What if you wanted to try that out in striking? What if you wanted a Muay Thai match to see how you stack up against just that? Or maybe that's your favorite thing to do. Like, I just love striking. I want to just see if not worried about takedowns, of how my striking stacks up. In one, all you have to do is sign that contract and say, yeah, this is what I want to try. And somebody like Demetrius Johnson, who goes over and says, yeah, I think I want to try this. And they're like, oh, well, we have the platform already. Come over and let's do it. And UFC is the opposite. UFC won't let you do anything else. They won't let you ride motorcycles, from what I remember. There's weird riders in your contract that say things that you can and can't do, like in your personal life, because you're property of the UFC. Your body, if it's damaged, they lose money.
They don't want you to be devalued.
Yeah, right. Because if you're a UFC champion and you go over and take a Yahoo stadium fight here in Thailand and get destroyed, you can't go back and be like,
Yeah.
And you got beat up by the tuk-tuk driver, and you go back to the UFC, and the tuk-tuk driver's like, oh no, that guy no good. He talks about how he beat you up, and he's telling his family that I used to beat up that guy. So yeah, you're gonna definitely lose value.
Yeah. Which is crazy because, I mean, they let Conor do it for the Floyd Mayweather fight, go over there and box. But I think that was kind of just like a one-time deal. And then they were sitting there trying to get Khabib to box Mayweather at one point. And to me, oh, man, that was just so crazy.
I've heard rumors of Khabib and Canelo. I've heard like all sorts of wild stuff.
To be honest, I hope that never happens. If you want to talk about that will definitely devalue Khabib, because no offense to Khabib, he's a great grappler, but if he steps in there and tries to box with anybody in the top 10, he's not going to look good. And to casual fans, people that don't know anything about fighting, like when I was talking to him before the Mayweather Conor fight, They just don't have a grasp of this is all that Floyd does. He does nothing else but punch with his hands. He doesn't do anything with his kicks. He doesn't have to grapple. That's all he does with all of his time. Where you got Conor, who's, splitting his time up between multiple different disciplines. He's not going to have the same boxing as Floyd Mayweather.
It's a general contractor and a drywaller.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
You got a guy that goes out there, he could fix your whole house, and he could do it in a good amount of time, do it well. You got a drywaller who comes in and can drywall your whole house in 2 hours, and it's immaculate. It's somebody that can focus their time on one thing, and Mayweather's the best at what he does. And like you're saying, Conor is great at doing all of it together. But you're taking away tools. You're not taking anything away from Mayweather. Nothing. Yep. You're saying you have all the tools that you've ever made for however many years, for 50 fights. You have all of those tools. We're not going to do anything to hinder what you do. But Conor, you learn this stuff, and then this is all you can use. And you saw it in the fight. I mean, I think he took Mayweather's back at one point.
Yeah.
And it was.
I'd have to see it again, but I'm pretty sure what he was doing is he was kind of tapping the elbow, almost like similar to how you would arm drag somebody.
Yes.
And coming out towards the back.
Yeah, so I mean, as far as that is that was kind of a joke. That's not the UFC really letting their fighter engage in another martial art. That was like here's a sideshow type of thing for that we know is going to make us a lot of money.
I think the other reason why the UFC wouldn't opt to do the multi-disciplined like fight card where you'd have, jiu-jitsu, Muay Thai, and MMA is because I don't think there's enough people that watch the UFC that know enough about each of the individual arts to actually enjoy it. I feel like they have a large, like, bloodthirsty type fan base. Not all of them, because there's some really intelligent UFC fans that, really know what's going on at any point during the fight. But there's also a lot of guys that, they just get together, barbecue, and drink beers and talk crap about whatever fight's going on, yelling at the screen for them to stand up when they're on the ground.
Well, that's my thing. So think of it this way, okay? Don't tell anybody. Don't tell anybody that you're letting them do something different. What parts of fights do those casual fans love? Stand up and punch. Stand up and bang.
Yeah. Hang on, my phone's ringing.
Yeah.
I'm that guy now. All right, go ahead.
So say, that we're having a barbecue and UFC is on and you and I don't know anything. And two guys come in the same cage that they just had an MMA fight. And they just beat the crap out of each other. And it's elite level striking. And you're like, whoa, did you see that war? But they never say, hey, this is only Muay Thai. We wouldn't know the difference. But I think that you and I, at the end, like the next day at the water cooler, we're going, did you see those guys that beat the crap out of each other? Because all the Fairweather fans, not all, most, when it goes to the ground, like you said, get up, that type of thing. If it was only Muay Thai, which is really crazy because that's what's, shown on one, is elite level striking. But if you took that and said, okay, this is Muay Thai only, you're going to lose so many fans.
Yeah.
Like if UFC was like, okay, this is our Muay Thai event, people will go, screw that, I want MMA. But they don't realize that what's the difference?
Well, take a look at Anderson Silva versus Israel Adesanya.
Yeah.
That was pure Muay Thai. None of them
no ground.
one shot for a takedown.
Yeah. Exactly. And people love it. And it was like, oh, this is fight of the year. This is the best thing ever. But because it was labeled MMA. And the States were so like MMA. That's our sport. It's not. It's really not, you know? And the striking of MMA makes people like Chuck Liddell, the heavy hitters that people are like, man, one punch power. We love that, you know? And Muay Thai creates elite level strikers. Kickboxing creates elite level strikers. MMA doesn't really create them. Where are they learning it? Oh, in kickboxing or in Muay Thai training, you know? So yeah, as far as the American mindset through the UFC, they would just not have to tell anybody. You know what I mean? Like this, not tell anybody. Same gloves, same shorts, same goofy Reebok gear, all that stuff.
That's true.
Yeah, put it out there.
But on the other hand,
biggest
you could never do that with grappling.
No. The grappling audience is so. The grappling audience. You see some of the series now that come out, and honestly, I've watched maybe one of them. You know what I'm talking, like submission only grappling and stuff that they have out now. I've watched maybe one, and I love jiu-jitsu, but it's not interesting enough for me to follow it wholeheartedly.
That's the other thing that I'm starting to notice is that there is a lot. Like when I first started doing jiu-jitsu, I was doing jiu-jitsu for MMA. That was like my main goal was I'm training jiu-jitsu so that I could do MMA. And everybody that I knew that trained jiu-jitsu had the idea, like they were MMA fans. All of them that did jiu-jitsu.
That's when I started at Wands. It was the same thing.
Yeah. So but it came to a point where there's tons of jiu-jitsu fans that know nothing about the UFC.
Yeah.
Like
and
tons of people training jiu-jitsu know nothing about the UFC at all.
And it's almost really like they feel like they're better.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, yeah, well, this is more of an art form or martial art or whatever. Jiu-jitsu guys and I would consider myself a jiu-jitsu guy. I mean, we've competed at Worlds and done all sorts of, jiu-jitsu tournaments, but the ones that you meet, they feel like they're a little better than MMA, the jiu-jitsu guys. But when we started at Wands, our jiu-jitsu program wasn't an elite level jiu-jitsu that I would see like Atos or anything like that. I think our coaches were absolutely amazing, but it was MMA. Like our coaches were MMA fighters at the time.
Yeah. So our jiu-jitsu program was more so an aid for guys that wanted to fight MMA. It wasn't like we were training jiu-jitsu specifically for Worlds or anything like that.
No. And we weren't like at the time, this was pre-Berimbolo and all that, but that's not what we were focusing on. Like the stuff that I learned the most was from people like you, people like Chris, heavy wrestlers, things like that. That's what I learned the most. And then when I took that and I went to jiu-jitsu academies, they were like, man, you got some really good pressure, or you use just basic stuff. I'm like, well, that's what we learned. We didn't learn the flashy before, we learned the basics. And that's what I think jiu-jitsu now is very flashy.
Yeah, that's actually what I like to teach is almost like no-gi MMA-based jiu-jitsu. But keeping that in mind, MMA jiu-jitsu isn't the best jiu-jitsu. But if you look at like somebody like Rickson Gracie's system, I think his system is a lot more realistic than even some of the world championship competitors because he factors in that you could be punched in the face.
Yeah.
I feel like that should still be ingrained in all of the jiu-jitsu academies. That yes, there's competition jiu-jitsu academies, but at the same time, they should be teaching that self-defense aspect.
A lot of the times, this is way off subject, but a lot of the times, people get very comfortable in jiu-jitsu because you're not going to get punched in the face.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm training something new in jiu-jitsu, I know I'm not going to get punched in the face, so I'm going to take a lot more risks.
Yep.
You know, going inverted or doing a weird leg lock or something like that you're like, oh, I could do this because nobody's going to smack me in the face. You know,
Yep.
and it's not realistic whatsoever. It is realistic to hone that skill, to learn that muscle memory, and then it'll be effective when somebody tries to hit you and you're already out of the way. But I'm saying as far as learning it, you know, people don't want to be hit. Like I said before, I don't like getting hit even in Muay Thai, you know, so it's not a fun thing, and people become, and that's why I think jiu-jitsu grew so big, is because it's high impact, but low risk as far as getting punched. Now, people don't realize when they get into jiu-jitsu, and this isn't to scare anybody away from jiu-jitsu, you will be injured. Knees, ankles, your back, your neck, arms, all of that stuff gets very stressed. You're learning moves how to break people's arms. You're learning moves how to make them unconscious. A step from dead if you don't let go. So you're learning a lethal martial art, but the way it's packaged seems very nice. Like if you go into a school and you watch jiu-jitsu training, unless you see hard sparring, like hard rolling, you're like, wow, this is pretty cool. You know, you go into an MMA school, they're striking, you know, like you're like, I don't know if I want to do this. So MMA is very, very like, or jiu-jitsu is very viewer friendly in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
You can
And
walk
you
in and feel
know,
It's a big kibosh! Locks out moisture, seals in freshness. Good night, Irene. Double hammer fist! Double hammer fist! Double hammer fist! Seconds remaining for a great survival story!